Hello, everyone. I've got some time to spend with you guys now. We're gonna catch up a little bit. The last band that I went into the studio with, it's hard to believe that it was 16 years ago. The musicians that were in that band, we had a real special bond for a little while until the band imploded and then we went our separate ways. But I got to thinking about guitar players. When we originally came together to start this band, there was no guitarist. It was going to be just keyboard, bass, and drums, mainly Hammond keyboards. There's this band that I played with a long time ago. They brought in this keyboard player, really young guy, 10 years younger than I am. And he was a total prodigy on the keyboards. And I kept telling him, like, dude, you've got to go on and release your own material because you have some really cool stuff. So he and I recorded some jams together. And then he went on, after that band split up, he went on and created his own band and he started to build up a following. Several years after doing that, he and I reconnected and he asked me if I wanted to be part of a funk jazz trio. You know, I would be the only string instrument, he'd be on keys, and another close friend and musician I'd played in several other bands with would be the drummer. And he would pretty much end up being the producer of the album that we recorded. In the beginning, this drummer, he couldn't always be there. So we would have to consider bringing in another drummer, which we never did. But when he couldn't be there, it would just be me and the keyboard player who also sang. And we would work on these songs together. And then he said, I want to bring a guitar player in. I'm like, oh God, don't do that. And the reason I was this way is because for a very, very long time, I absolutely could not stand guitar players. I hated them. Now, for anyone watching this video who's a guitar player, there is no fight for you here because I was once a guitar player. I always wanted to be a drummer. I went to my parents. I said, listen, I'm really into this band, Motley Crue at the time. I was 10 years old. I'm really into them. I want to play metal. I want to play this stuff. I need a drum set. And my parents were like, no way, we're not going to listen to it. And they got me a guitar. And I was so angry that I got that guitar. That's kind of what a spoiled brat I was. But I was so mad they got me this acoustic guitar. And it really wasn't that good of a guitar. But I started playing it and writing some stuff on it when I was pretty young. I think I sat there and stared at it for about a year, maybe 2 years. And then I started trying to play it because I got into Prince and started trying to play his stuff. But I'm like, this is not working on an acoustic guitar. But anyway, after a while, the action became really high. And at this point, I had become completely immersed in thrash metal and hardcore punk and wanted to play that kind of stuff. So my mom got me a couple of guitar lessons. I ended up getting this Flying V copy guitar. It was a Hondo Formula One, I think. Before I knew it, probably about 2 years later or so, I felt confident enough to join my first band with my friend Chris. I played metal for a while, even after I left his band. But part of the problem when I was playing in his band, he had a revolving door of guitar players. And he told me, he said, look, I'm the lead guitarist in this band. So what I say goes. I'm the founder of this band. I created this band. I said, okay, fine. But I would tell him, like, I don't want you to bring this guy in, that guy. Some of these rehearsals, I'm not kidding you, there'd be 4 guitar players in the room. 4 guitar players. And a good bit of the time there wouldn't be a drummer. And there was no bass player. We had a singer. So after a while, I said, you know what? I'm going to get a drum set somehow, and I'm going to bring it to your house, and I'm going to play it here at your house, and I'm going to learn. I'm going to get good at this drum thing. There was a band, I guess a couple of guys went to our high school, but they were older guys. They were older than we were. We were barely 16 years old. And my friend Chris allowed this band. They were a big local band in Atlanta. Like, they were really, really good too. Great players. And they did a lot of rock standards and stuff. They did a lot of covers. So they did stuff like Dangerous Toys and Guns N' Roses. They did all these rock songs and metal songs. And anyway, they rehearsed at the house and they had all their stuff set up in my friend Chris's basement. So when we were rehearsing or whatever, and those guys were gone, I would get on the drums and I would fiddle around, and one day I decided to fiddle around on the bass. I didn't want to mess with the bass at first because the bassist in this band, he was a bruiser, man. He was a big, tough dude and he was kind of a grouch and he was a little bit of a bully. I mean, he never put his hands on me, but I just didn't want to get in his way. But one day I just felt brave and I decided to pick up his bass, and Chris took photos of the very first time I ever held a bass in my hands. He had this P bass. I strapped that thing on and started playing it and something clicked. Just after getting off the drums, I got on the bass and I decided I'm going to play bass. And then from there on out, I continued to play bass in that band. And then I moved on and started exploring playing more hardcore, like Sick of It All type hardcore and stuff like that. And then the whole grunge thing happened. And when that happened, I was reluctant at first. I said, I'm not buying it, and I liked it, but I was not going to change what I was doing. I was going to stick to my guns and come up with something else different. And I would meet guitar players and work with them, but I would constantly, time and time again, I would get in these bands with guitar players who were very headstrong, and they were typically the leaders of the band. And I would be like, okay, whatever, it's your band, you're the guitar player, you're calling the shot, I'm going to defer to your judgment. And I would pretty much stay out of their way. I wouldn't tell them like, if I were doing this on the guitar, I would do it like this. I wouldn't say any of that. But I had a deal that I made. You're not going to tell me what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You do what you want, but you're not going to tell me what to do. I've got the bass covered. Okay. And the only other thing is I want to be involved with arrangements. That was kind of my thing in bands. I would always be like, guys, we need to take it out a couple more bars here. We need to do this. We need to make this change here. I hear this. Let's do this. That was my thing. And I would stick to my bass. I didn't want to step on anyone's toes. I would just discuss arrangements. Okay. But as time went on, one band after another, I found myself being at odds with the guitar players in every single band. If it wasn't the guitar player, it was the singer. And I would always be like, you need to sing it like, it just got to this point to where I started to think, to myself, like, well, a lot of people were in my ear, in my camp saying, so-and-so's not singing this the right way, and you should tell them this. And I would listen to that stuff, and I probably shouldn't have, but I did. Anyway, after a while, I got into this band. We went into the studio. When we came out of the studio and I saw basically the paperwork and everything of the credentials on our demo, the guys had listed themselves, the guitar player and the singer. And I said, well, what about me? What about Tony? What about the rest of the band? There's 5 of us in the band. What are you guys putting? He goes, well, we wrote the songs. I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't write the songs. I mean, come on, man. But he said, you call your 2-second bass line writing a song? I'm like, it's a part of the song. And I honestly believe that if I contribute to the song and you didn't tell me what to do, that I deserve some sort of writer's credit. We need to split it 5 ways. You didn't tell Bo exactly what to play on the keyboard. You didn't tell Tony how to play the drums. So we got into a huge fight about it. But from there on out, they said, look, we're writing those songs. If you want to take more part in the songwriting process, I'm like, we can do that. I can work on lyrics and stuff with you guys. But either way, it's got to be this way. But then other things happened and we ended up breaking that band up. But I continued to play with that guitar player in other groups, and he would bring his songs in that he already had, and he'd be like, I wrote this song. And after a while, I started to get a little irritated with the guitar dominance in a band. I said to myself, you know what? One day I'm going to have a band and it won't have any guitars in it. As much as I loved guitar players, once again, if I didn't say that from the top of this video. Anyway, as we move on, I ended up getting into a band with a longtime friend of mine who was a very skilled guitar player and very skilled in the studio. He was skilled to the point to where he wasn't afraid to tell me, knowing that I would probably become physically violent. He would still say, listen, I want you to play this on the bass. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to kill you. We would fight worse than the Gallagher brothers, really. We were really bad. When I got out of that band with him, and our band split up and everything came to a halt, I really didn't want to play with people anymore and it wasn't so much that because he was a guitar player, I was frustrated with guitar players as a whole. There was just this backseat thing that I was constantly dealing with. But in his defense, in this band, we split everything 5 ways. There were 5 members in the band. We divided royalties and everything were split 5 ways. Honestly, that's the way it should be done. I don't care what anyone says. I believe that that's the way a band should be. It should be somewhat of a democracy and things should be divided evenly. If someone's totally not doing anything and you're having to tell them every little thing to do, then yeah, things should be different. But if people are saying, look, I've got this drum part, I want to play the drums like this. Everything is so organic and spontaneous in a way that just feels right. I think everyone should just divide it evenly and keep the fights and legal battles out of it. So anyway, This went on for a while. I would play in these bands. I played in another band with this guy, and we sang so well together. He was the lead vocalist in the band. When we would do a lot of that posy style, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the posies, but we would sing some of these songs. We sounded great together, and he was a smoking guitar player. And I just loved playing with him. There were other things that eventually led to the end of that band or the demise of that group as well. But I really have a lot of respect for him. I don't know if he ever ends up seeing this. Dude, you know who you are. I played with this guy from, I think, I want to say 2002 or 2003 to 2006 about. We went out to LA together, played out there. And anyway, I had a lot of respect for him. When we put this other band together with the keyboard player and this other guitar player came in, I was really rude to him at first. He was 10 years older than I am. He would say things and I would just be like, oh man, don't tell anybody what to do. And I would talk trash and he was very reserved. At the time, I didn't give him enough credit. I was really tough to deal with. Eventually, we ended up in the studio together. I was struggling with a song. When I'm in the studio, I am a terrible, terrible perfectionist. Like, I'm just so bad about it. I want everything to be perfect with my bass line. There can't be any mistakes, and I gotta really know what I'm gonna do. And if I don't do that, then there are problems, and it kind of screws everything up, because it's the laces, it's the glue that holds everything together. And when it's not working, it's not working. And I had some personal things going on and it was interfering with the recording process. So these guys had an intervention and they said, listen, we've been listening to your performances on this recording and they're not good. You're not focused and we need you to focus. We need you to turn off your phone. We're all going to turn our phones off. We're not going to talk to anyone. We're going to finish this session, but we're asking that you redo all of your bass lines. And I was like, wow. But you know what? There was no fight. I said, you're right. I'm not focused. I've got all this stuff going on. So I stepped outside, called my business partner, and came back in the studio and I said, okay, I'm here. Let's get it done. There was one song, and I think it was the second to last song on the album. I was struggling with it. I didn't like the bass line. And I kept trying to experiment and find other bass lines for this song. Pretty sad, but I can't remember a lot of the bass lines, which is crazy. I see these videos where maybe they're just fibbing a little bit, but like Freddie Washington or some of these other guys are like, can you play this song for me? Oh yeah, I still remember it just like it was yesterday. And they play it. I'm like, wow, how do you do that? That doesn't happen to me. Like I have to go back and relive that stuff and I'll be listening to it. I'm like, wow, it doesn't even sound like me playing. But I definitely did record these bass lines. But this one song, I was really, really struggling. We were short on time. And Doug, the guitarist in this band, steps up and he says, listen, man, I want you to play it like this. Just listen to me. And he comes up with this bass line. I'm like, wow. That's really cool. And he's like, come on, man, I know you can do it. Just lock it in, keep your choruses as they are. It's gonna tie in nicely. I love those choruses, man. They remind me of James Jamerson. That's just kind of my imitation of Doug. Awesome guy.
Yeah, man, sounds good.
Man, you should hit all of them now that you're totally in the pocket. Just run through them.
Kill you.
Just run through them.
Anyway, he saved that session by stepping in and saying, play this bass line. So I give him credit. As far as I'm concerned, he wrote the bass line for that song. I mean, I did write the chorus, but he just had this vocabulary with the guitar. This guy could play, and still can. He can play any key, any time, any song. He knows everything. I'll give you a good example. Vocals. I don't remember the lyrics. I'm terrible about remembering lyrics. That's my caveat. But I can sing any melody for just about any song, any given time. You say sing it, I'm on it. I wish that I could play bass as well or had the knowledge on the bass that I have with my voice. Let me put it that way. Doug, I just don't give you enough credit. If you happen to see this video, man, the drummer in this band who also produced the record, he said, man, I've played in several bands with you. Honestly, I feel this is your best bass playing you've ever done. There are some other things I wanted to say, but I guess I'm just going to leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, that's why for so long, I hated guitar players. But after my experience with him, he made me fall in love with guitar players again and greatly respect them, to the point later on that same year after that recording, I ended up putting the bass, and picking up guitar. I ended up buying a few. I already had one electric, a Strat, but I ended up buying some acoustic instruments and I became totally immersed in guitar and working more on songwriting and I just had this newfound respect for guitar players that I didn't have before. But it's also important to mention that there are a lot of bands out there and people give the guitar players all the credit and they think the guitar player is doing everything, but they're not. Ozzy is a good example. I mean, I hope all of you love Ozzy as much as I love his music. But Bob Daisley, I know Jakey Lee wrote stuff too. Bob Daisley wrote a lot of stuff. He's a bass player. Juan Crocier from Rat, he wrote a lot of songs with Rat, like some of their biggest songs. I mean, the list goes on, but there are a lot of bands out there that are huge, and the bass players wrote the songs. Now, I'm not talking about Sting. We all know what he's done. But there are a lot of bands that where the bass player was just sitting there playing bass and people thought nothing of it, and he's writing these hooks and writing all this stuff, but just doing his job and playing the bass. And I've always felt like that was important. In the early days of me playing, I felt like it was a competition between me and the guitar player, and I would try to do things to upstage them. I would kind of creep into their solos. Don't do that. Oh, that was so bad. But I would do stuff like that. And after a while, we all came out of that studio just loving one another and being really proud of what we had accomplished and what we had recorded. You know, it just changed my perspective so much. It was a huge paradigm shift for me. We're cool now. Like he and I, after all that, you know, I would hang out with him. We'd sit around, and I always liked Roxy Music, but he made me even more of a Roxy Music fan. And we'd just sit around, talk and listen to music and, you know, talk with amongst friends. And the stories are just countless, really. I just could go on forever talking about that. But anyway, let me open it up. Do you guys, and I'm talking to bass players for just a moment, did you ever feel like there were moments throughout your journey where you felt like you were at odds with the guitar player? If so, please speak up and let us know. Guitar players, how many bass players were formerly guitarists? How many guitar players are considering switching to bass? Because that happens a lot. I see that. And, you know, there's no love lost. Like even the guitar players that I played with and I fought with them, I love them all. They know I've made it a point to get out there and make peace with everyone that I've grown up with, people I played with. I've done everything I can to atone for my behavior and the way I used to act when I was basically a child, you know? But yeah, that's about it. Also mention some other bands, like bring up other bands here because I'm kind of drawing a blank right now. There are a lot of bands out there where the bass player is writing a lot of the music. Billy Gold from Faith No More, he writes a lot of the music for Faith No More. Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam. There are a lot of you out there and you will not go unnoticed or unrecognized on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I might play a little bit of that music.